Welcome to another episode of What Am I Doing with My Life with me, your host, Alyssa Desai. Do you ever sit there just thinking, what am I doing with my life? Well, this is the podcast for you. Each episode normalizes not having it all figured out and gives you actionable tips when you're feeling stuck, lost, and overwhelmed by life. I'm joined by some amazing guests, and I'll also be sharing some solo episodes to help you with wherever you are in your journey right now. Today, I'm joined by the amazing Goodness. Let's dive straight into her journey.
Hi, Goodness. How are you?
I'm well, yeah, I'm good.
Good. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to chat to you. And I guess let's just start straight away. And I would love for you to introduce yourself, what you do, and then go into your journey, how you got to where you are today.
Amazing. I'm Goodness Victor. I currently work in music, so I work at Spotify within the music partnerships team, and I work with songwriters, producers, and music publishers, and all the relationships that we have with music publishers. In terms of my overall journey,
I know that's a big question.
it's a mega question. So I only entered the music industry in the last kind of 4 to 5 years. Before that, post uni, I was working at various design consultancies. I studied design and innovation at university, it was a design engineering course, but it was called design and innovation. And so worked within the design space, internships, so on and so forth. Was working a full-time role as a UI designer. And then, there was just a point where I was looking for something new to do. And a friend of mine was like, you should work in music. A role kind of came up at Decca Records, interviewed for that, started scouting new artists. So I was an A&R scout at Decca Records, which is within Universal. And about 2.5 years after doing the role at Decca, whilst I was doing my full-time role as a UI designer, the current role that I now do came up, and went through the process of entering into the job that I'm currently at.
I love that your friend just suggested it. Were you thinking about it before your friend suggested it?
So he was already working in the music industry post-uni. I'd always send him new music constantly. The good thing about doing a UI job is if you're in a project, you have your headphones in and you just have to focus. So I could listen to new music all the time. And I think maybe he got tired of me sending him stuff because I was like, oh, you're an A&R, have you seen this? Have you heard of this new artist? It's like, you might as well do this job yourself. The role at Decca actually came through him because it was lady he had worked with at a previous job who was looking for just an interesting scout to join the team, and I had no experience in terms of music business, music industry. I just really loved music, and at the time I was making playlists all the time. I'd maybe year 1 of working as a UI designer, I discovered that there were people who were paid to make playlists. I didn't know that before then.
I had no idea that people get paid.
That's a whole job, whole ecosystem of its own. Discovered that. I was like, oh wow, that's a job. I would just make playlists mainly for my friends. I'd share them on Instagram. I started a separate Instagram page, which is kind of archived now, but it was about kind of African music, but 60s, high life, Afrobeat from then, and then kind of plotting to what we have in the modern day. I was just doing those things for fun, but they all came in really handy when I had my interview at Decca, and the person that became my manager, who's amazing. Those were sort of the things that we focused on in the chat that we had. But it's no, in the creative industry, it's always, come in for a chat, but it's actually an interview. And if you think it's a chat, you probably won't get the job. But so that's kind of how I found my way into the industry.
I think it's there's so many questions I want to ask you, but I think it's such a lovely reminder of if you notice a friend or family member or someone like having a passion for something or you see a real strength in them, like say it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we don't necessarily think, oh, this is something I could do as a job, or this is something I'm really good at. And when someone else like highlights it, you're like, actually, and that's completely now changed your path. It's amazing.
Yeah, completely. Because I didn't know any of the roles that existed within the industry, definitely not the role I do now. But I had an understanding there are A&Rs that work on records, but that was probably it. And managers, yeah. Beyond that, I had no idea that there was a whole world behind the music that I loved. Yeah. And I was like, throughout university, I'd always go to so many shows. There's a little venue in Notting Hill, I think Notting Hill Arts Club. They're back, I don't know if they still do it, but there used to be a night called Communion that like some of the guys from Mumford & Sons would run. Like I'd go all the time with my uni friends, and like I said, so many different festivals all around the country. But I just didn't know there were these jobs that existed. It just wasn't in my. If you'd asked me as a kid what I'd wanted to do, working in music probably wouldn't have been the answer.
I think that's so true. I think so many people going into school and university aren't really aware of the jobs that are out there. Like I definitely look back and I'm like, I had no clue. And actually that's like, I remember flicking through the uni prospectus and just being like, what is something that I could do as a job? And that's how I landed on PR and marketing, because I read it and I was like, oh yeah, I could do that as a job. Definitely wasn't for me, but I was like, yeah, I think I could do that. What did you want to be when you were younger?
That's so funny. Well, first of all, the job that I currently do didn't exist when I didn't think the company existed when I was younger, right? So, or even when I was finishing school. But when I was younger, I was a funny kid who wanted to be multiple things. So if like my mum would ask me what I'd want to be, I want to be a professional athlete, I want to be an artist, and I want to be a doctor. But the doctor was definitely influenced from parents. But yeah, I would always be like, it would change as well depending on what my interests were. So like professional athlete was, I can't remember what year, but the Commonwealth Games were on and I was obsessed. I watched every single like sport. And then like it was when Dame Kelly Holmes was like achieving amazing things, and Paula Radcliffe. So I was like, I want to be them. I want to run. And I'd do like cross country at school and win a medal occasionally. So I was like, yeah, I could be a professional athlete. And then I was always creative as a kid. So that's why I probably was like, it'd be great to be an artist. And then, yeah, like I said, the doctor aspect was just migrant parents and just kind of that belief of there are specific jobs that you go into in order to, be able to provide for yourself and have a career that I guess there was status attached to. Whereas, I think a lot of junior doctors probably should be paid a lot more, and there still is that status attached to it, but they're not compensated in the way that they should be. I digress. But yeah, those are the things that I was interested in. Throughout school, I ended up pursuing the route to medicine.
Okay. Tell me more.
Oh gosh. But I guess with those sorts of careers that have clearer paths compared to kind of where I've ended up, you do have to make decisions quite early. So Definitely. By the time you're picking your GCSEs, you have to be quite strategic, or within your last few years of school, you need to be getting work experience. So I did work experience with one of my godparents was an ENT doctor, so like went and saw eye surgery, just so you can write it in your personal statement for university. So you have to think at like age 15, this is the path I want to be on. So I did all of that. I did awful A levels. So I did chemistry, maths and biology A level. Geography AS. I should have kept geography because I actually enjoyed it and I was doing well in it. Chemistry was awful and people still say it's just the worst A level. But again, if you don't pick those particular A levels, you can't go on to apply. And then there's the whole like medical exams, or I've forgotten what like the non-verbal reasoning type exams that you have to do. So UK CAT, and like studying for those. Yeah, so I did all of that and didn't get into any of the choices that or the main ones that I did. So I didn't get into any of the medicine courses, and settled on a medical engineering degree. So that's what I initially went to university to do. And within the first term, I was like, I'm not enjoying this. This is not for me. I always tell this story. I don't know if you had this at university, but at that time you'd have like little bleepers, like like in Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, when they ask the audience and they have to hit the bleepers to put their answer through. Yeah. So we're in a lecture, and there's a question the lecturer has put up, and everyone has to hit A, B, C, or whatever. And one of the answers was like, I don't know why I'm here. Like one of the, and I if that was C, I pressed C. Like, I do not know why I'm here. And I think that was a wake up call, because I was like, oh, the lecturer can go back and look and see who was like, I don't know why I'm here. And I openly, clicked that, and it just dawned on me that I wasn't enjoying the degree. Couldn't see another 2.5 years of doing it. And the only course within that first year that I was enjoying was like engineering design drawings, or technical drawings for engineering, something like that, which was slightly creative. And so I then went away, and I was like, okay, how do I find like a design engineering course, so I don't have to completely start afresh? And I didn't do like art A level, or any of or D&T A level. So I didn't have any creative A levels behind me. So I was like, how can I pivot? So I went away, did some research. I knew I'd have to speak to my parents, but I needed a plan before I spoke to anyone else. And I was super lucky, because at the time there were a handful of design engineering courses like in the country. I think there's one at Brunel, which I knew of, because someone I knew had completed that course, and I didn't know that there was a course at the time that was half at the university I was at the time, which was Queen Mary, and then also at Goldsmiths. So I was just doing my research, found this design and innovation, design engineering course on the Goldsmiths website, was reading through everything. Again, was like, I don't have a portfolio, I don't have the creative A levels, and just had seen that it was in conjunction with Queen Mary, and I was like, okay, this could be useful. Went away. I was already having conversations with my tutor at the time, who wasn't very positive. He was like, because he was heading up my particular course, and he was just very negative and very like, what, like, if you leave the course you're going to fail, like, and they have all of their kind of quotas, and they don't want high dropout rates. So he wasn't supportive at all. But after I discovered that the course was half at Queen Mary, found the professor that led the course, ended up having a meeting with him. I don't know how I had so much courage, because I would have been 18. So I think maybe emailed him, had a meeting, and he was like, he gave me like a week. He was like, if you can create some sort of portfolio and come back, then let's chat from there. So I went away, and the good thing was, during the kind of first term of medical engineering, a way for me to just get through it was that I would illustrate a lot of like medical, like, so like mitochondria, I was like drawing it out, like all the different cells. So I had these drawings that I'd done, that I was like, well, those could work. Added it to my portfolio. There was I'd done a GCSE that was like quite creative. There was a lot of like, I've forgotten what it was called at the time. So found the files for that and printed everything out and made this haphazard portfolio. And had the conversation and was accepted onto the course, but to start the following year. So end up having like a semi gap year.
Wow, honestly, like how did you have that strength to just say, I'm going to continue, I'm going to create this portfolio? Because I think for so many people, they can come up against barriers or obstacles in their journey and just think, oh, I can't do this. And I wonder if you can remember how you were feeling at the time and how you just continued and kept taking steps forwards.
Yeah. I think I'm quite a determined person in general. That's definitely one of my strengths. But at the time I was like, I think what drove me was that I can't continue this, so I need an alternative plan. And in order to go back to my parents and say, this is what the alternative plan is, like once it's finalized, like I just had to come up with something. And like I said, I'd always been creative, so it made sense to lean into those strengths. And it just happened to work out. But like thinking back now, I'm like at 18 to be bold enough when my current tutor was like, no, this is a really bad idea, to then seek out in the building the professor that was the head of a different course to ask to transfer. It was probably a pretty bold move for an 18-year-old, but it all worked out. And I think the determination probably was what allowed them to, allowed me to transfer onto the course. But it wasn't plain sailing post that, because a lot of it was a very small course, so there were 8 of us from first year to third year, and then 6 of us for the fourth year, because I think it's more of a UK thing, because when I speak to Americans they're like, what? But in the UK, if you do like a 4-year engineering course, it's a master's included, so 6 of us ended up doing that. And like I said, at the time there weren't many design engineering courses. I think a few years, or when maybe the last year that we were on our course, Imperial started a design engineering undergrad course. They had a master's course of the Royal College of Art at the time, which a few of our lecturers had studied, but there wasn't many undergrad courses focusing on design engineering. But like I said, it wasn't plain sailing, because a lot of the engineering was physics, and I hadn't studied. That was the one science A-level I didn't do.
You were like, I can do chemistry and biology,
but physics, no. So, so there was a lot of just getting my head around things. Like maths as a basis was good, but again, people who kind of go on to do a degree that's physics heavy have done further maths, and I didn't do that. I was definitely not smart enough to do further maths. And then all the other people on my course, a lot of them had done art or design, DT at A-level. I just kind of had to find my way, but I was really happy with my decision, so I think that just kind of got me through the course. Yeah.
And I think sometimes when you are doing something that you really know isn't right for you, it can sometimes give you even more clarity around like, okay, what do I want to do? And it sounded like starting off with your first degree, because it felt so like not right, it probably gave you more of a kick to go, right, I've got to figure out what is going to feel right. Whereas I sometimes think when we are in jobs or points in our life where like it's okay, we don't have as much of a kick up the arse to actually do something different, because we can kind of coast in it. And I think for me, very early on in my degree, I was like, this is so not right. But I stuck with it, and I wonder if I'd like really, really like hated it, I might have changed. But I just thought, I can't get my head around it, and I didn't know what else I wanted to do. I wanted to do psychology, but it was the only A-level that I got a C in, and I thought, maybe I'm not clever enough to do psychology, so like I don't want to start something and fail it. So anyway, but I think it is interesting.
But it sounds like with your degree that you actually finished, like there was still some of your strengths that you could lean into, whereas it was just not working out. Like it was just a lot of engineering as well, and a lot of calculations, and I discovered actually in that first term that I was dyslexic, and I'd gone through all of school with without anyone noticing. I guess when you're a bit of an overachiever and you're still getting the grades and everything is correct, teachers are like, oh, that's fine. But yeah, no one had noticed, even though the junior school that I was in, like they had like specialist classes for dyslexic. Like there would be kids that would be taken out of class to go and have their like dyslexic extra support each week. And I was a dyslexic child that it just wasn't picked up at all. Yeah, so I think maybe that also added to my decision of like, I'm just going to struggle through this degree.
Yeah.
I may not even be able to finish it. I'm already not enjoying it. How do I find a way to wiggle into something I'll enjoy more, that leans more into my strengths? But again, at that age, still would be acceptable in terms of like the engineering side of things. Whereas at this age now, I would have just done whatever.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do fine art, but like if that had been the thing that I wanted to do, now at this age, it's like just do what works for you. Whereas 18 is such a 18, but you've had to make decisions at 15 in terms of what you're going to do. You're just so young. You don't know what you want to, and so many voices outside, whether it's your parents, whether it's teachers at school, are still influencing your decisions at that age. Whereas, yeah, once you're in your 30s, you kind of have your own voice and listen to your own voice.
I definitely, and I think it's so difficult at that young age to decide what you want to do. And there's lots of people who I know are maybe, on that path to go into the medical field or to become a lawyer or something where it is more of a structured path. But there's so many people who have no idea what they're doing. And that's my whole aim with this podcast, is to like normalize it. And even if you do go into a degree or on a path that you don't like you can change it. And I think that's why you're such a great example of that, because you had that at university and then you changed, and then obviously you changed your career again. And we can very much feel like, okay, I've got to just figure it out at 15 or at 18 and that is it for the rest of my life. And I'm really now more leaning into, I can do anything, and maybe this is what I want to do now, but in 10 years time I want to do something else, and then 10 years after that I want to do something else, and just take a bit more of the pressure off.
Yeah, and it's true. I think, was it last year that I stumbled across, because I follow a lot of the Architectural Digest like Instagrams, like every single country. I don't know if it was like the India page maybe, but I came across a interior designer. But I don't know if she had been a psychologist before and then became a stylist. So like every 10 years, her career just evolves and she just does what she would like to do next. And it was such an interesting way of just approaching life. But to my earlier point, I think once you get kind of late 20s, early 30s, you realize we've got years ahead of us. And the world is changing so much. Like I said, the job I currently do didn't exist when I was in school.
Yeah.
So we will have to adapt, especially if you're a creative person. I think though, like something like medicine, humans will always need their bodies checked, and health and well-being will always be there. But I think even within that, there will be. We're all just having to adapt as humans. So
definitely. How did your parents feel when you said, I've decided I'm not going to stay in the medical field?
So my mum is just quite a supportive parent for a Nigerian parent. So again, because I knew if I came to her with a plan, so if I'd maybe approached her and been like, oh, I don't want to do this, I'm just going to drop out, I don't have a plan, maybe it might have been different. But again, there's a thing in terms of knowing who your parents are. But I knew not to say anything until I had a plan. So I'd secured the transfer onto the other course, and I was like, it's kind of already in the works. This is what I'm doing. So she was fine so long as I was happy. And it was still engineering, to be fair. My dad, not so much. He's like, what are you going to do? But it all worked out. And again, maybe at that point, I still was listening to myself and my own inner voice. I think when it was interesting with my mum was career, because it's like, okay, you've studied design engineering, great. You've now kind of, because I guess when people think of design engineering, it's very industrial design, physical products. People can kind of get their head around that. I decided between my third and fourth year, I did an internship that was digital product focused. So yeah, UI, UX, and I was like, oh, this is a whole world. And my project in fourth year was completely digital. Like I didn't do anything physical. But up until that point, like I'd been like soldering things and like making 3D printing things and just making lots of physical products.
Sounds like a fun course.
It was the best. It was such a great course. It was I met up with some of my uni friends a couple of weeks ago, and we were just reminiscing. It was it was like The Apprentice meets like Dragon's Den. And then we're like running across London because we had lectures at Queen Mary and at Goldsmiths, and Goldsmiths is it's art school, right? So interesting characters in terms of students, but also lecturers, like just, yeah. So if you want your mind to be expanded, it was just such a great place. And then we'd be sat in lectures at Queen Mary with like mechanical engineers, aerospace engineers who were very like serious and need their investment banking job after leaving university. So it was such a contrast, which just keeps you creative, right? Keeps you exposed to different people, different problems to solve. And that was especially our design practice, like it was all about finding a problem and creating a solution. Some of our solutions were great, some of them were not so great, especially if you're like running out of time, you don't have an idea. And our briefs were always really vague. So in our first project, first term, there's 8 of us bright-eyed students, and it's like, design a column was the first brief. What does that mean? And you could interpret it.
What did you do?
So I focused on the spinal column.
Okay.
And then I was like, my whole project was called like the Museum of Thought. So what if you could go into a museum and you could see everyone's like thoughts? And then the piece were like, I'd made like skulls and like spinal columns, and they were all in like specimen jars, and it was like, well, if you could like go into this museum and see people's thoughts, but I had to like represent it in a physical way in some form. So all of us had such different interpretations, but all of our briefs were it was like, I think there was one about space, like design and interaction with space, so space like so it was very open to interpretation, but it allowed you to be creative. But if you got stuck, it was hard because you still had to deliver a project, a presentation, and you had to justify your reasoning. And so if you got stuck and say you had 2 months to complete a project, if for like the first month you just had no ideas, it was horrible. But again, going back to being quite a determined person, like I got my first second actual internship, which was at Fjord Design Consultancy, which is now like under Accenture Song, I think. So I got that because second project, I had no ideas and I was procrastinating, but I called it like positive procrastination, of like, I have no clue, I'm so stuck, I can't think of any ideas. What can I do instead? Okay, I'll look for internships to apply for the summer. It was one of the ones that I applied for and managed to get it.
I really like that, positive procrastination.
I need to lean into that more nowadays. But during uni, like I would always positive procrastinate. I'd be like, I'm stuck, I can't do this. Okay, what shouldn't I be doing now, but could take my mind off of it? Yeah.
Amazing. Taking you back then, you were saying that for your last year, you were focusing on UI, UX.
Yeah.
And I think you were saying like your parents maybe were a bit unsure about what that was going to look like as a job, or
Yeah, I think because I'd managed to intern at roles over during the summer, which worked out. They were fortunate to be like paid internships, which again, within the creative industry, you don't often find paid internships, but all of the ones that I did were paid. I think that was some reassurance. So yeah, that was fine in terms of pivoting into design, or like UI design. Got my first job after a couple of internships. It's like, great, she's settled, she's focused, she's got a good career. It's quite, my mum probably wouldn't be able to like explain to people what I did for a job, but it's like, oh, it's like websites, great. It's tech-ish, great. And then, yeah, about 2 years in, I'm like, oh, actually, I now want to go into music. And that's where my mum was like, music? Like, what? But I had a sense, like I'd always been, like grew up with African music at home, a lot of Igbo music to be specific. And at that time I'd sensed, especially there was subgenres bubbling in Nigeria in particular that I was just seeing like labels globally were all interested in. So I just could sense the next wave, and I felt like I could be involved in some way. And yeah, I think so in terms of pivoting into music, I could just sense that kind of Nigerian pop music was going to get popular, and it was music I'd always listened to, loved. And so yeah, it just felt like the right decision to pivot into the music industry. Yeah.
How did you feel when you were making that pivot?
Again, I guess I always have a plan. So I was still in my full-time job. The opportunity came up, but it wasn't like I just quit my full-time job straight away. I made it work. So I would say like I would like reply to my emails from Decca like before arriving at my full-time job, like on the way. Again, I was already listening to music during my time at work anyway, to concentrate, to be able to deliver all the UI stuff. So when demos would come through, I would listen to them whilst I was getting on with my work. And my manager, like at lunchtime, would message like, "Are you free tonight to go to a show?" I would be free, and I would just go. So I made it work around my job at the time. So yeah, it wasn't like a thing that I did straight away. Like I was able to come up with a solid plan before fully jumping in. And I think that allows you to be brave, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
definitely. I so feel that, because I think, you know, I definitely speak to people who want to completely change their career, but it feels really scary for them.
Yeah.
And it's just that reminder of like, you don't have to literally tomorrow go, I've quit this job and now I'm starting a whole new one. I think actually this transition period, or just allowing yourself to like explore things that you like and think about, okay, if I did do a job in this area, what would it be like before making that huge leap?
Yeah.
And again, there's no right or wrong. There might be people listening who are like, I just want to make that leap and I'm quitting, and like, good for you. But if you're the type of person who enjoys more of a transition period, I know I definitely had that with myself, like where I was running my business on the side and in my full-time job. And it just, I guess, allowed me to make that transition rather than making the huge leap one day. And yeah, I felt like I had more of a plan, and I felt more like I was supporting myself in it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think like if the catalyst of wanting to do something new is because you're no longer enjoying what you're doing, I think having the focus on the new hobby or new side hustle or steps towards a new thing allows the current state to be a little bit more tolerable. Like you're able to like for me, I was able to get to my job, still do a good job, because I was like, oh, but I know there's a plan. I know I don't have a clear picture of what's next, but I'm working towards what's next already. So yeah, for people that like transitions, I think just coming up with a plan or outlining what it could be like alongside what you're doing currently helps.
And have you ever had moments when you just thought, what am I doing with my life?
That moment at university when the lecturer asked who doesn't want to be here.
You were like, me. I wonder if anyone else pressed that buzzer. Maybe like everyone in the class, and that's why he was panicking when you came to him, because he was like, no, I can't do that.
No, that was 100% a moment. And then when I quit my full-time design job, I think because that was like middle of the pandemic, it was just myself and my younger sister living like in our family house, and full transparency, like I don't know, I think I just got to a point where I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. But you know, when work is starting to make you teary, and my sister was like, what, like work, you shouldn't be crying, like at the point where you're crying because of your job, maybe it's time to leave. And that just kind of woke me up, and I was like, oh, actually, I had a little bit of savings. I was working at Decca already, and I just wasn't enjoying it. I'd actually just gone through a whole interview process for a different job at Spotify, which I didn't end up getting, but I got to like final 3 candidates. And yeah, it was a feeling of like, what am I doing here? I don't like this anymore. And I handed in my resignation. It was tricky because, but I made it work. And I think that pushed me to, like within 6 months, after kind of not getting that first job, quitting my full-time job, throwing myself into everything I was doing at Decca, the role that I currently do came up, and I was prepared as well. I didn't have lots of experience with kind of the area of the business that I currently work in. I did like an online course in the pandemic that was like focused on music business, which touched on publishing, but beyond that I didn't have lots and lots of knowledge. But I just leaned into my strengths. A great thing that I learned from my degree was like how to blag very well. When you're standing in front of your whole class and your professors, and you've come up with an idea in 3 weeks, you have to sell it. So because we'd always have to pitch. So I was able to interview really well. Got in the job, and then I had 6 months to just learn as much as possible. But again, I'd done it before. Like I'd had that 1 week to turn around a portfolio.
I love what you've spoken about then, because I think, you know, it's very easy to look back at jobs that maybe you haven't enjoyed, or universities or courses or whatever that haven't been maybe the thing that you wanted to do. But I really truly believe that like everything you do will teach you something which is going to help you in the future, and maybe you don't quite realize it at the time, but it will help you. Like I look back at my degree, and at the time I was thinking, why have I got to do all this stuff that I've got to do? But one of the things that they really pushed us to do was internships, because every year you had to create a portfolio. And I don't know if I would be the person I am now if I hadn't have been pushed to like do all of those internships. And maybe if I'd studied something else, they wouldn't have pushed us to do it. So I know that I've learned things, and even though maybe not all of those internships I really enjoyed, but I will have, you know, become more confident, learnt skills, whatever it was. So I really think from everything it's like almost different pieces of the puzzle that add up and like get you to this point.
I completely agree. Like whilst you were saying that, I was thinking, if that first tutor hadn't been like, no, if you leave this course you're going to fail, and I still went with my gut instinct made the decision and I survived. I didn't fail. I thrived, if anything. That early lesson of like, sometimes other people get it wrong.
Yes.
And you should go with your gut feeling.
Yeah.
That was great to learn super early. And I think that's probably what's allowed me to pivot whenever I've needed to, because I've got that example of, it works itself out.
Yeah. I really do get that sense from you of like, you trust yourself.
Yeah.
And like, you have this, inner trust of like, I'm going to be okay and I will get through this and it will work out. And I so agree with you. Like, not everyone is right. And like, almost like, let other people have their opinions. And, you know, obviously we touched on your parents, and again, I speak to loads of people who are like, but my parents want me to do this and I want to do that. And what I often say is like, your parents really just want the best from you.
Yeah.
And I think definitely maybe our parents, or, you know, the generation before, it has been this thing where it's like, some careers are deemed as really, really successful careers where you can make money and they're good. And when you suddenly want to do something else, like, you know, I don't think my parents ever really knew what coaching was before I sat down and I was like, okay, so I'm going to be a coach and I'm going to work for myself. And, you know, for most parents, they just want you to be safe and happy and live a really good life.
Yeah.
And they have a view of what that is to create that. And, you know, I was also had a smile on my face when you were talking about like the medical professional or lawyer. I'm half Indian, and it is quite interesting. Like, if we ever meet our like Indian cousins or family, like they will often be like, oh yeah, my daughter's a dentist, and my daughter's like I don't think like they're all dentists, doctors or lawyers. I know this is a huge generalization, but I was sort of, you know, smiling at my face thinking, I've got no idea what my grandma's telling people I do. She's probably made up a job for me. But yeah, like, you know, sometimes people can have an idea about what is a good job, and just, I don't know, that real feeling of do what feels good for you and what makes you happy. And I truly think that's where you'll feel most fulfilled, in, even if that like includes changing your job multiple times.
Yeah, I agree. I guess it's easier for my mum now because she can just say, "Oh, I work at Spotify." Yeah. But to your point of in general, like parents, caregivers, they just want what's best for the child overall and what they know to be best, but they lived in a completely different time. Like I said, in the 90s when I was in school, these companies didn't exist. All these big tech companies that I'm sure a lot of like Nigerian, African, Asian, Indian parents are probably really proud that their child works at Meta now. Whatever, it didn't exist.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't have been able to plot out a path towards it really. But my point is that these companies didn't exist, so it would have been tricky for our parents to be like, oh yeah, one day you can work at Meta or you can work at Google.
Exactly.
Exactly.
How have you identified your strengths?
It's a good question. I think they're usually there. So back to the university example, when I was on that degree and I was like, oh, I'm not, this is hard, I'm not enjoying it, but I've always been creative. The one course I'm enjoying has a creative aspect to it, like it was technical drawings, but it was still drawing, and I would draw as a kid. So I think that it's usually not for everyone, but for a lot of people, it's what comes quite easy to you.
Yeah.
What do you enjoy doing? What doesn't feel super stressful? As it's like in its rawest form, like there can be stress if it turns into your job or you have deadlines towards it. But in its rawest form, what comes easy to you is often a strength. So yeah, just I'm naturally creative, but something that maybe isn't seen as you wouldn't automatically think as a strength is I am quite a determined person. So yeah, if I come against like obstacles, I am very much like, I have to get to the other side. And then if I can't, then maybe that's just the wrong thing. So I then try something else. But I'm always kind of determined to get to the finish line or the other side. So I think those are two strengths.
Yeah. And they really come across. And I think your journey to me is a really great example of follow what you're interested in and follow your passions.
Yeah.
Because again, you don't need it all figured out, but just connect with, okay, I'm interested in this. Let me see where that might take me. Because that's ultimately, I mean, unless you think I'm completely down the wrong path, but from where I'm sitting, it feels like that's really how your career has evolved, by you following what you're interested in and where your passions lie.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Because as a teenager, I loved discovering new music on MySpace. And 10 years later, I'm in a job where, my previous job where it's all about discovering new music, right?
It is quite interesting. Like, I often wonder whether deep down as a child, we maybe do have an inkling about what we want to do, maybe a teenager or a child, but it's kind of like all these expectations or other people's opinions or what we think we should do kind of, or what we don't think we're capable of kind of comes over us, and then we lose our way. Because the first job I ever thought I really wanted to do was become a child psychologist.
Wow.
But I got so kind of bogged down by, I'm not clever, I'm not going to be able to do all of that studying, I don't know how to do it, it's not going to be possible. So that really like stopped me. And now I'm like, I mean, I'm not training to be a psychologist, but I'm training to be I was going to say psychiatrist. I'm definitely not doing that. I'm training to become a psychotherapist. And I'm like, it feels like a bit of a full circle moment. And I almost think maybe younger me did have more of a idea about myself than I really gave myself credit for, but I got so overwhelmed by all the things that I was unsure about that I went down a different path. But it feels quite nice that I'm coming back.
I completely agree. Like, I was a kid that would read all the CD sleeves and like look through every little detail about a CD, and now like part of my job is credit stuff on the platform, right? So I think your inner child does know.
It's such a lovely full circle moment. So my last question for you then, if anyone's listening to this and they're just feeling stuck, lost, they're just like, what am I doing with my life? What 3 pieces of advice would you give them?
Okay, so I'd say for people that like have additional capacity from like what they're already doing day to day, if you have the space, like I'd say try a new hobby, lean into maybe some of your interests from when you were younger, lean into things, like I said, that come easy to you. So if it's painting or if it's dance, like explore those things, go to a class, find inspiration, like constantly find inspiration, because you don't know what could then like kick off an idea. So if you already have capacity, start exploring. If you don't have capacity, because some people are just, you're in a job you don't enjoy, but it's taking all of your time, and then your time outside of your job, you're recovering and you just don't have any capacity or energy. I would say try to start carving out some time for yourself. A funny little thing that I say now, like post the pandemic, I feel my work is within my life as opposed to life is around work. So try and get towards that where your work is just within the rest of your life. So it might be really small, of like getting that time for exercise or for space for your own thoughts and getting your well-being like tip top, so that you can then have capacity to start exploring new ideas or new hobbies that you want to try, and that might help you pivot into a new direction. Not that every hobby has to turn into a full vocation, but it might just expand what you feel you can do, and allow you to pivot and change.
And almost like take back control of your life.
Exactly. Yeah.
And start actually living a life that you want to live, whether that's like having the time for yourself or having the time and doing the things that you enjoy.
Yeah.
I'm so with you on that. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Honestly, it's been such a joy to hear about your journey. I feel like I could get into even more details, but we don't need to or any more of my questions. So thank you so much. Goodness, I really appreciate you
Thank
joining
you.
me.
This was really fun.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to or watching this episode and for supporting the podcast. It honestly means the absolute world to me, and I want to spread the message that it is okay to not have everything figured out. No one really does. So I hope listening to this has helped you to feel less alone. 2 things that really help me spread this message are leaving a review and also sharing this episode with anyone you think that it might help. So if you are able to do that, honestly, I would appreciate it so much. Thank you so much. Have a lovely rest of your day. Take care, and I will see you soon.